There has been many explanations and talks about the Khartoum crisis and why it happened and how it could have been avoided. And that's a long analysis, but for me there has also been some personal learnings out of this crisis. Some of them very hard, like they came with pain and with a lot of suffering during the learning process. And I would like to talk a bit about them in this short video, as I have lived the crisis from day one and had big consequences on my life and brought me to take on a very deep thinking process about myself and my life and my ways and my thoughts. And it was very hard, and it took a lot of energy because you have fundamentally, as a human being, a culture around you, a family, a language, thoughts and ideas that you're part of. And if you grow up into that, and then you suddenly have to fight it or to look into it, it's a very claiming process. I can tell you that. It can take a long time, especially if you're at the same time working or have to work with your family and people around you. And it needs a lot of deep insight and ability to be reflexive, like to look back onto yourself and into yourself, and being able to use that in an objective manner, like bringing out your own thoughts and prejudices and thoughts and ideas and beliefs, and putting them aside, and then looking at them from the outside. That's not easy at all. Some would say that's a process that can make you mad or crazy, and perhaps I was close to that edge as well, because that's part of it. And that's why most people, they avoid it and don't do it, but are fascinated by the process in it, and the dwelling in that process. And it all started for me with the Khartoum crisis, actually, or the aftermath of it, and the deep personal crisis that hit me there and started like unrolling and unfolding in the years to come, and finally came out to light in 2014. And from 2014 until now, I've still been in that process, and I think it will never leave me because it had such a deep impact on me. They say that humans are basically, when we are born, we are born crying because it's like we have a sense of some kind of being in a position in the world where we are not able to. We have a journey ahead of us. We're not able to just be safe and sound in a static situation. Of course, we cry because we are cold and we need food, and we are hungry and we need someone to take care of us. That's the biological explanation. But on a more symbolic level, it's also true that we cry because we are bound on a journey we can't get out of. And we have not chosen our parents, neither our culture or language or the place we are born. We just open our eyes and there we are. And so were I. I was born in a Lebanese family, and that family was just around me, and I had to figure out with time, and now in retrospective, look back at who they were. Who were my parents really? And I hit the 40s before I could do that. I have never been able to really look into who was my father and my mother, and how's their personalities and what kind of psychological traits do they carry with them. That was a very tough and the demanding process to do. So most of the time we ignore. I ignored, and I think many others do the same as well. It's a psychological fact that we try to use the ways of just putting things aside. I think Freud was one of those who spoke deeply about these processes as well, and how we sometimes just to get along, just finish off some of the doubts we get, or looking into things. So born in a Lebanese family, but raised in Denmark due to the civil war. And my parents took us far from home, and very far from home, out in the countryside in Denmark. That was as well a challenging process for a small that was as well a challenging process for a small and spoiled kid. And I had to look all into all that. So when the cartoon crisis hit, I was actually, part of me was Danish, and part of me was Arabic Lebanese in many ways. And by the building of the religious identity I had from my teenage years, I was also a religious minded scholar to be, like a student of learning spiritualism and the laws and the basic rules and the orthodoxy, all of it. So I had actually a mix of, at the same time, being at the Danish university and being part of a religious university. And I had always to like put one aside and use the others, not in a schizophrenic way that you are totally one person at one time and totally another in one time one other, but like when you are studying in the university and you're looking at things with religious view, you have to sometimes accept, like being pragmatic and say, well, that doesn't concur with my belief, but here I'm just taking the lessons. I'm not here to fight the ideas that this university is giving or handing out, but I can have my own interpretation on them. So I was basically a religious minded guy in a Danish society with a Danish way of thinking. And I have memories and connections in Denmark that goes very deep and very way back. And that's why when the crisis hit, it's like, this country of yours isn't really respecting you, or is it respecting the religious side of you? And I think many people with Muslim background, born and raised in the West, can have the same kind of situations. They feel Westerns and they feel part of the European society they're raised in. They remember the grass they ran on and the friends they played with and the language they spoke and the jokes they sat on the stairs saying to each other and the things they've explored along the way. And they all did it in a Western youngish fashion. They were like a part of the society and part of the way of life that's around them in this country and this place, wherever it is. It could be Germany or England or France or Belgium or wherever in the Western society. At the same time, many of these, and the same with myself, we are part of another culture, part of a home that comes somewhere else. Maybe we are second generation, now we have the third generation, but it's still the same, because the second generation, for most part of them, some of them are totally assimilated, that's true, and some of them have taken the chose to segregate, and that's also true, but for most, who they call integrated, they are like between that culture and the origin family culture, or like the way of life they find in the homes of their parents and from their own old society. And that's what I did in my youth. I went on a travel to look back at who I was and what are the belief systems I carried and the traditions I had with me, and I took them in. And I didn't want to be an integrated person, like always living between two poles. So I tried to segregate myself mostly and live in a way of life that cohered with my religious beliefs. But I was still attached to the society around me. I was still, part of me was still Danish all the way into the core. I know that the racist and right-wing people and maybe white supremacists won't like this talk, because they say, you are from another place, that's it, we are here, you're there, let's fight, or let's get things moving, you don't belong here. But that's not the truth for the people who are like me. And I think the one who expressed it best was Spock in Star Wars. That's one of my favorite series and favorite movies as well. And his father tells him when he's split between his Vulcan and human sides, he keeps telling him, you will always be part of two cultures. And that's exactly what hit me during the years. I loved to watch movies and always did, and kept doing that also during my religious years. And, I kept a shut eye to the more the kissings and the more nude scenes if they were there in the movies, but basically the movies has also affected me. So part of me is to the core Danish in the way of thinking, the love for the country, the way of thinking, the relaxed people, and part of me is not. part of me was also very annoyed by the Danish way of living, and also the way they sometimes treated some of us, not directly but indirectly, what we call the structural racism, or the hidden feelings that you could sometimes just reach. You can feel if they get sometimes to the surface, the exclusionist ideas that they are the ones who have the claim to the things, to the country, to the work, to the jobs, to do things right. And I've met some of those during the years, and the meetings weren't nice or fun, and you had to look deep into how they really look down at people from other places. That's not right. And are you Arabic? That's not the easiest part of it. Much easier if you're from Portugal or from Greece. And I know a guy who's married into he's an educated man and married into a Danish family, but still he has to sometimes find out that he's from somewhere else, even though he's treated fairly well. And so we keep having this, because what else is there? There's racism in the world, and there's tribalism, and whatever there is of humanism and human rights and the religious idealism, that's a build over. But basically, I learned from the Khartoum crisis that it all goes back to either a kind of tribalism or a kind of racism. That's what Ibn Khaldun, the mid-age scholar in socialism, he told people very, very basically that tribalism is what keeps the world going, and that's true, in my opinion, today. And all kind of what can you say, kind of alterations of that sometimes fall down. We have to keep trying, and we have to get people up to a universal way of thinking. I think some of the globalists are trying that and keep doing it, and opposing and fighting the tribalism and racism all at once, and also the religious fanatism and the atheist secular fanatism, because it's all tools that goes back to that racist or tribal way of thinking. Anyhow, the universalism was also part of my life, and I started getting idealist thoughts and tried to combine them with my religious experiences, and also tried to find them in the society around me. And when I read the Wilson doctrines, I loved it for the world, like the President Wilson doctrines about a united world, a free world, a world where people are safe and secure and have enough. The basic of the human rights, basically. And then the Muslim scholars tried to find the same ideas in Islam, and looked back and saw, wow, we have a lot of sayings that can concur and confirm the human rights in a global fashion. And the same did the Christians. They say Christianity, that's the basis of the universal thought of human rights. So any way you look at it, we have this overbuilding of idealism and universalism that I love and like, and I was attached to. At the same time, I was very much bound into a religious way of thinking that got hit and spit on by the Khartoum crisis during that time. And it was a hit from the neo-liberal side, who really wanted to stand fast on the principle of freedom of speech, because that's all they actually have. Like the religious people, all they have is the idea of salvation, and these guys, all they have is the idea of the freedom of expression. And so it's a fight over beliefs and basic values in each camp. And I was part of that, but I was all the way torn between my religious feelings and the feelings for Denmark. And of course, I sided up with my religious friends and colleagues, and led part of the protest and helped with it, because I didn't find it right that they should spit on the religious feelings and people like that, and throw such a negative picture out of the religious figure. But when I worked on the crisis, and afterwards the aftermath started showing me that basically what my religious fellows were doing, they were actually just trying to find ways of each one consolidating his position and gaining from it, and all under the name of that universalism. We're back to the problems with communism and the problem with the Soviet society, that it's built on these ideal thoughts of everyone is And so I was really torn and split during the crisis and afterwards, especially that is this like the old things we read about the communist society and the party there, that it was built on ideals but they didn't held up in the real life, that it was all about consolidating positions and getting gains and positioning yourself using the ideals as a way of personal gains, despite that they didn't they opposed the values that you were carrying or telling people about. And that's why I had a deeper look on who was I and what was I supporting and what was I a part of. And does this idealism even hold in the real life? And I know people will just say, hey, get on with your life, man. It's realistically not real to think about this. But if we stop thinking about how to get above the level of tribalism and racism and just plain misuse of ourselves and each other, we will fall to the level of the animals and maybe lower than that. We have to keep always reflecting and trying to say, can we be a better version of ourselves in a way or another? If and the others can't, at least I can look into myself, because that was what I wanted from the beginning. And I have had always to pull myself up to that level and to keep trying to not fall into the deep pit of cynicism and misuse of others, and just looking at them as a bones to be collected and meat to be eaten and ways to step on to get over them. That's actually what have brought to us the ways of narcissism in these days and psychopathy in many broad ways, also in politics and between both politicians and people with fame and gains. They are very, very dangerous people to be around sometimes, because they just know that this guy is ideal. That's a danger. This guy really wants things to get better. That's not good for us. And so it's easier to just let people learn about your tribalism. You're part of the tribe. You support the tribe. Tribe support you back. It doesn't really matter what you're really fighting for, or whether it's logical or not logical, and whether it's righteous or not. And here, and the same with the racism, you can say that you can just fill people up with the feeling of being a herd and being together and being part of something bigger. And it doesn't matter what you're saying and how you are using them, or maybe eating up their money or their future. People are not rational beings all the time. That's why we have to keep pulling ourselves up and out of that deep pit if we can. And if we can't, we're lost forever. And that's why many people just don't want to look into that, because they know it's an abyss, it's a dark pit, and they know that it's lost forever. It's like reminding me of Pirates of the Caribbean, where they get to Barracuda, that island with all these pirates falling in the deep shit of pigs and drunkenness and dirtiness. And they know they're there and part of that, and they will never get out. They cannot look beyond it. And that's why it's hard for people to look up, because they look up and they can see they are in a big shit and dirt pile. So it's easier, let's keep sticking to our racism or to our tribalism and hide it with some religious covering, or hide it with some ideal covering about freedom of speech or freedom of truth and democracy and all these slogans and fluxes that are getting used, unfortunately, from the ideal realism, from the idealism, the realm of idealism, and are getting used from the realm of universalism, brought down to that pit of dirtiness and ugliness and misuse of others. And so when I really looked into myself, it was a very hard and harsh process, I can tell you that. It's not easy building your life over 15 and 20 years as part of a religious community and a spokesperson and symbol, and then try to look deep into it. If you can if you can be part of it anymore, and why you're part of it, and what have you been participating to, and why, and to whose gain, and what about the country you also love and like and are part of? Can you do anything to keep it together without losing one of the two? And was that what you started out wanting to do? Was that what you really wanted in the beginning? Being a fighter against something you're also part of? It's like fighting yourself in a way. And so when I started looking into myself in that process, and I've always wanted to make a third book about it. I made the first book about my farewell to Islamism as a part of giving up the political and ideological structure in my life. And then I made the courage to doubt, look into the philosophy and the way of thinking I had. But what about the psychological side, the psychological depth? So the process of looking back into the Khartoum crisis and finding out you were the biggest loser in that crisis because you held on to the ideal view of fighting for what you believe and standing out as the last man in that fight, and not having a tribe to go back to, because, well, I wasn't Palestinian and most of the people were Palestinians around me. And one guy told them that. I never forget him, this guy, an elder man. He said to them, if this young man was one of your kids or part of your Palestinian community, would you all have left him on his own like this? And somebody told me what he said from that meeting. And I was very proud to hear that somebody like really had the sense to say that. At the same time, one of my the wife of one of my Danish friends, she told me that at one time I was dining with them in those years. And she told me, your tragedy is that your own people left you. So she was also seeing it in the same perspective of okay, you had a good fight, you lost, but you have your tribe to get back to. I didn't have a tribe to get back to, and I stood fairly alone and basically like had to see what to do. And here I was in the country that actually was the country I was raised in, and we got safety and good times in as strangers from our former home as Lebanese people in Lebanon. And I was raised here, educated here. I'm fluent in the language. I can speak and write the Danish language better than many Danes. And I've read a lot of literature in Danish, so it's part of me. It's deeply part of me, this country, and I only wish it the best and wish it love and goodness. But where was I in that now? I was a hated face. I was a guy who brought the Khartoum crisis falling down upon them. That wasn't true. I told that in the account I made. If you look into the historic events in that period from September to March between 2005 2006, you will see that it wasn't true. The picture of me solemnly being the guy who did all that. I was just a small, like a piece of chess in that game, and that's why later on I had to like get over the shock and get over the trauma, and in a way like looking deep into who I became and why and what happened to the people around me and those people who are using these universal ideas. One part wanted to protect the picture of the prophet and like his name and the face, and wanted to also protect the Muslim community from being scarred with such a negative association. On the other side, the other group whom are just as bad in my eyes in the way of using the idealist ideas for own gains, and then they had better means to do it. I also got to understand that later. They were using the freedom of speech and using the ideals of democracy and human rights and the freedom for everyone as a way also of gaining control and power and maybe personal economical gain, So on both sides, it was a way of getting on in the world on a Machiavellian way. And that's very opposing to the way I live. And that's why many people tell me, you're not born to live on this earth. You're equipped for it. It's like fighting in a jungle and you're basically a bird of peace. You're just wanting to see the green leaves on the trees and and everybody getting along, and that's not the reality. And if you don't adjust yourself to the reality, you will be a big loser. You will be eaten. Well, I am on a journey to prove that if you look deep into yourself, it can be dangerous. It can have its it's very hard moments, but it's worth it, and it makes you a better human and makes you look at the humanity in a deeper and broader light. This is on the personal level. The process I was in after the Khartoum crisis, I learned that our freedoms are not to be gained easily. And that's why I later agreed with the persons who held on to the idea of freedom of speech, even though it was a very, very negative and bad way of saying it and doing it. That's because they are not to be taken for granted. I have seen in many, many places and during history and in our current times how hard it is for anyone, just like me now sitting here recording this, could in other places have made the police show up or some other kind of gangs come and threaten you or killing you or putting you in prison. So it's not easy. Many groups feels threatened by thoughts like this. But is that also true in the West? Is the West really as free as we think it is? I don't believe so, and I know that we try to just tell ourselves that because that's the easiest thing to do. We are part of this tribe and we are a bit racist against those others, dark-aged Middle Eastern people who have these dark thoughts and ideas. And the light blue-eyed people, they tell themselves that to calm themselves on the way of life. And the same does the religious guys from the other communities in the Middle East. They shake their heads at the fake and illusionist freedom of life and ways of life in the West, how it's destroying people and families and pulling things apart, and the illusion of you are free to do what you like, but you're not really free. You're bound in heads and hands. People are in debt to their necks, and people have no time to do anything else but go to work and come back and feed their kids and perhaps have a few visitors and then go to sleep. There's no time to follow the newspapers, to really express your thoughts, or really to have time to delve into what's going on behind the lines in the politician corridors and the people with power. And then the small group of commercial leading millionaires and billionaires with the companies and the banks and people who are like in privilege. They can sit and figure everything out with a very, very able and capable circus artist. I call politicians. They get onto the stage and they're very good at tricking people to vote for them. They get a lot of money behind the scenes to do that, and that's all to get things going. And while the people are very, very occupied in their each day life. So what has really changed from the Middle Ages, and what has really changed from the time of the proletariat, as they called it in the very fake communist society as well. It was fake there too. There were a few idealist people who talked about these things and really wanted it. I don't doubt that at all. I know there are very good idealists, but and people who sacrifice themselves every day for the communist society and now for the Western liberal society, fighting the evil of the Middle East and the Chinese and all that. And in the Middle East, the people who are sacrificing themselves to kill their enemies because they believe that's the way to heaven and God. It's all illusions about society and way of life they don't really have. And they're being used by people with power. And I thought at some time in my youth that was only the case in the West, because I was already bought into that idea of the Islamic way of living. I went from being a spiritual seeking, identity building, religious seeker to becoming a part of an Islamic alliance, an Islamic ideology that looked at the West and interpreted everything in that light of misuse and basically no good way of life. And the same I find in the West. I'm part of Denmark, and I've been as a young man, and I have friends who are very secular from the beginning and never bought into the religious ideas. And when you hear them talk, they will say the same things, just in the opposite direction. They will say this is a dark age, Middle Eastern groups who are using people to fight their fights, like we see in some countries. They use people to fight their fights and die for them while they are sitting on the thrones and their kids are getting the best educations. and their friends are being in the best positions and getting the good money and the villas and all that. And it's happening all over. You just have to send a few sociologists and psychologists and people who are looking into gains out of misusing people's values, and you will see it all over. A small group you think are the ones who are really leading society towards the ideas. They are living in the best houses, their kids are getting the best educations, they have means to bring the funds out of the country, steal it, or otherwise make ways to their friends to gain out of what they have gained access to. And so we go back and we see that the West are shaking their heads at that, and people are being taught that, oh, these corrupt people down there, and not really looking into the deep pit they themselves are in the society. They're brought up in of people making agreements without having it look like agreements, and they go each to his side saying, no, we didn't do any toilet agreements, no, not at all. He was just a guy with a project, and we thought this project was good. But if you look deeply into it, that's because he's a friend of someone they know, or they go to party together, or it's a guy that is helpful in their further like educational way, or maybe the politics in the country, or maybe getting re-elected, or maybe their son getting into the best university later, or maybe it's just they call it interest of the country. And it's so easy to use as I said before, the universal ideas, the realm of universalism and the realm of idealism. It's like a tree with a lot of fruits that we love and like to look up to and see, wow, it's so gracious, it's so beautiful, and we want to pick them down. Once we pick them down, it's being used in this pit of dirt with all the piracy that's in it. So at one time, I was running away from this fakeness and from this dirt, and wanted the ideal realm, like a kind of paradise on earth. And that's why I went into the spiritual way of looking at things, and then I became an ideologist in that part, and then came the Khartoum crisis that put everything up towards each other in a kind of a fight pit. It's like now is time for showing, like, these fake people that this is the better way. And later on, when after a very hard and harsh process, I had to say bye to all my friends, and I had to leave many good things and days and memories with people I dined with and lived with and got help from, all because I wanted to change my mind. They couldn't be friends with me anymore. They are very manipulated into that ideologies they're in, or the religion they're in. If you're not part of our religion or way of thinking in details, then you're not part of us. As I said once to one of my Lebanese friends in the airport, I told him, listen, I could just change my mind from being a Sunnite, the Sunni groups, to one of the Shiite group, and I will get the same condemnation. So why not go all out and try to look honestly into what I am and what part of things I am? So people are deeply intolerant towards each other, and in each case, also in the West. Look at the intolerance I'm meeting even today. 10 years after the Khartoum crisis, after I published my book, and I really wanted to apologize both to Denmark, and my role wasn't the best, but wasn't the worst. And it was just part of the fight, and others had also a big role to play in what went wrong. But nobody really neither accused them of that or put them under a trial for that. Like the ambassadors, if they were met by the prime minister at that time, maybe things would have had a different current and different place. And if the working group didn't put pressure on me to be the spokesperson, somebody else would have taken that role, and maybe the old guy would have continued in that role, and things would have turned out differently. But I didn't know at that time that they were all protecting themselves. They could see the storm brewing and coming. I could feel it as well. I'm not stupid at that level. I'm stupid in other ways, but not in that level. But I felt it's a duty, the idealist duty of a hero or a guy who just carry out the mission and of the religion. And that's part of what I wanted to look into, and what I want everyone, if possible, to look back into. But no one did, so I stood fairly alone with that. And so the crisis of the cartoons made me, it was a wake-up call, and it made me like also be aware of how important the freedoms are for people, and freedom of speech, even if it's a small thing. And when we compare the corruption of other countries with the corruption we have, like in Denmark, Scandinavia, we can see we are still on good terms with things, but that doesn't mean that this corruption, this bad acting isn't there, and that an elite of very rich and very influential and powerful people are actually running away with most of the power and the way of handling things, and while people are left more and more to themselves. And this will show. I'm telling you already now, this will show, because that's history. It's just like looking back into history and seeing the development of civilizations. And several people have been trying to do that. One of them is Rubio. No, not Rubio. This guy's Ray Dalio. An economist and a guy who tried to, like, he's a tradesman, but he tried to look into civilizations upwards and downfall. And so has Spengler done before him, and Toynbee and George Bernard Shaw, and so has people from the Islamic societies, philosophers looked into what makes a society good, what makes it bad. And we are in the West heading towards these situations where we don't look into the bad things we are standing on, but we want to fight the enemy out there. It's always the other part, The cartoon crisis definitely was a symbol of that it's the others, their religion and their way of doing things. That's the suppression. But they don't look at the suppression just under their noses of women trafficking, and problem with alcoholism, and problem with families and kids and diagnosis and whatever. And no, it's their way of living. And the other people, like those I was part of, the religious people, they don't look at their practices either. I was there, and I can tell you, I wasn't the best practicer, even though I really tried. I thought I was living up to my religious duties, like towards my wife or towards my family. But I was also sometimes an upset, angry guy who just went through of doing things his own way, or didn't listen to her advice, and maybe just pushed some good ideas away also from other friends, because I was such a believer in what I was doing. I remember one time a guy called me, and a man, he was educated as a pharmacist, but got sick. And then he called me and told me that I had to understand that if we wanted to protect the prophets, like honor and picture, we had to live up to that in our way of living, in our way of doing. And I thought it was just like he was just trying to express main ideas, but later on I thought about it. It's very true. We have to really dig deep into that way of thinking that we have in the Muslim and Islamic societies. And that's what I was trying. But the hatred won over the reason, and the Danish media blew things up as well, and made me look as a guy who just want to spit on my old community and just want to betray them. And that was not what I did at all. That's all in my book, and you can see the way I've talked about things are not with that cause at all. Even my debates in TV wasn't between the years 2014 and 18. It wasn't at all that idea I was carrying with me. I wanted just everyone to look deep into the abyss and the dirt and the way of living we are carrying with us, and without knowing most of the time. I remember some of the guys who were sent to die for their religion in the old days. And I remember one of them, an Iraqi guy, son of a man I knew living close by. And he came to me once. I was a young preacher and teacher also in religious studies. He said they wanted to send him to fight in Iraq or somewhere else at that time. And I told him, don't do that. You're being used. You're being used by groups of people who are living well, having cars, and their kids are having the girlfriends here in Denmark, even though their parents are religious. They go with the girls outside marriage, and they do all the things you don't want to do, and then now they're sending you to fight while they're sitting here, maybe gaining some reputation or money out of that. Why don't they? And the young man didn't listen or wasn't able to listen. And I think today that he was also maybe just running away from something in his life, like maybe some psychological disturbed situations, and parents or friends, and or distorted between two societies. And he was just seeking that heavenly idealism and universalism like I was doing in my young days. And that's exactly what happens. That the tree of these fruits I mentioned before of realism, the realm of idealism and universalism, are being used in a society and in a way to be like sold for a cheap price. And that's what I got to remember, that the Quran was criticizing in the very beginning of the biggest chapter in the beginning, that saying, talking to the Israelis, because they were the chosen people of God, he said, don't go using selling God's words for a cheap price. And that goes exactly for the Muslims, I can tell you that. Goes exactly for the Christians as well. Any religious people can do exactly the same with these universal and idealist fruits, like God's words in their ideal form are like don't kill, be righteous, be good to each other, show compassion, help your neighbor, don't do to others what you don't want people to do to you, worship God and honor His face, and remember that you are here temporarily. All these ideals are being used to make people do things for some different type of gains, and we can't see it. We can only see it if we're part of it, and we get part of it and we start seeing it. It's not easy getting out again, and that's what happened to most people. They just get stuck in that tribalism, or they push it away and say, I don't want to dwell on that. And that's happening in the West as well. The critical thoughts are mostly being put aside because there is no time. We want to fight the enemy, the bad people, those down there in the dark Middle Ages, Middle East. And so the idea of trying to get out of who you are, and or who've become, to find who you really are or what you really wanted, that's not easy. That's something that's really that's time consuming, energetic consuming. But somehow something in this universe, maybe God's hand or something good, even though it was very, very disturbing and hard and harsh for me. I had crying moments. In these 5-6 years, I really had to slowly and piece by piece try to reshape who I became and who I was, and look into that reflexively, like putting yourself outside yourself and looking at yourself. How does people look at me, and who have I become, and why? The most hated man in Denmark, why? And it was false, because some people who led the campaign against me weren't fair towards me either. I can't only blame the religious side I was part of. They were also victims of something, that they were weak and they didn't have power. They knew no newspapers and no way of fighting an equal fight. But I was also put into a very harsh trial, like being burned at the stake from the same country. And the people who are using the idealism of freedom of speech and democracy and inclusion to say, this guy, there is no place for you here at all. And what is that speaking? That's tribalism. I can see it, between the lines, and everyone would be able to see it. It's tribalism speaking behind the ideals. Because if it was really the ideals of compassion and mercy, when I apologized to Denmark, and I did it from my heart and said, I'm sorry for my role in that Khartoum crisis. I went too far with these people and keep continuing the struggle, but we did it with some ideal means. And part of this was told and part wasn't told. And sometimes the people came to tell me, we will forgive you. And some friend, a Danish friend, told me, when people tell you they forgive you, they are not trying to show you compassion mostly. They're just trying to put themselves above you. So have the European people really the guts to look deep into themselves, or do they just want to keep on drinking their sorrows in alcohol and these very shitty, smelly bars they sit in all afternoons to drink their consciousness if they so people are actually running away from themselves. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that all European people are shitty, but we are in a deep shit, all of us. We are in a kind of pyrism, and we have to bring ourselves out of it. I've met many good people in Denmark who really took care of telling me that I shouldn't blame myself too much because I wasn't solemnly the most responsible guy in this. And some people knew that these stronger forces in Denmark behind the newspaper and behind the cartoon crisis, they had also a big role to play in what has happened, and they know they are guilty. And that's why if someone has to believe in heaven and hell, I can tell you, if you have tasted life, you must tell yourself there must be a better place somewhere, or there must be a place where people who've done wrong and know they've done wrong to others and suppress them, they will have to pay or count up for that. Many people wanted me to pay, and they still want me to pay maybe today, and my life is also affected by it. And today I have two groups on my neck, and not anymore, but I had for many years. I had the old like what I call the racism of the Danes on my neck, because they just want me to suffer. They just want to see me burn. They don't care if I regret, repent, or change my mind. They don't even believe that it's possible for anyone to change his mind. I've heard that a lot. That once you reach a certain age, something grows fast into your head and you can't change your mind. You are once and forever just part of the ideology you're in. And maybe some of it is true, and they don't dare to shake up that in themselves either. I remember, I don't know if it was a priest or someone from that background told me, it would be terrifying if I did what you did. If I was going to look into my Christian inheritance and who I am, I'm being raised, and that would be a hell for me. That would be terrifying. So people, it's easier just to burn that witch on the stake and say we don't want to listen to you anymore. But here I am. I keep keeping my voice from time to time. I've been silent for a long time because I was just dwelling deeper and finding my balances and exploring the world and the religions and the ideas of psychology and mysticism and other good ways in life that you can get inspiration from. But basically, the people from what I call the racism, they just want to see you burn. They don't want you to change their mind. They want to see you hanged and paying for what you did. And the other side wanted to see the same as well, because they thought me as a traitor when I left the community. And I said, I don't believe in what you believe in anymore. I'm not Islamist in my thoughts and ideology. And I don't believe you're going to bring people the idealism you are promising. It's just a way of getting to power. And when you get to power, you'll suppress even your own brothers and sisters from another way of thinking. If you're the Brotherhood, I promise you're going to suppress some of the other groups. And if you are the Salafist, you're going to suppress the Sufis. And if you are the Hizb ut-Tahrir people, you're going to suppress the Brotherhood, because they hate each other. They hate the way they think. So there's something psychologically rooted and deeply problematic in using the ideals, while it's all tribalism and it's all small egos using the hatred and the lust for power to get the overhand. So I was hated by the two groups, not because I changed my mind, but because I didn't fit in the way of living they were in. Like, they kicked me out of their hellish, non-paradise. And I was okay with that, but it was hurting. It was hurting a lot, because I was for many years isolated. I couldn't get work. And I know today, if I apply for work, if my application gets into the hand of these small groups that has to look into the applications, there could be one of these Islamic or pseudo-Muslim people sitting there, and he will sabotage it, or one of the neoliberalist or maybe anti-Islamists who remember me from the old days, and they will sabotage it as well. So I'm walking on a very fine and difficult line in my life, and have been for many years. And despite that, I found help from God, from like secret angels looked out for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here. And like sometimes close to crying when I say these things, because for me it's a miracle I'm here at all, and then that I can get through between these two tribalists and racists in between life. And that's because there are people who believe in universalism and can feel the deeper spiritual associations with me, and that's God who sent these people and angels to help me. I was in some part of my life doubting the ideas also of religion and God, and I'll tell you more about it. I was doubting the idea of God, not because I couldn't feel God in my life. I felt the deep spiritualism as a young man, and it kept with me all times, and I felt protected by higher and deeper and better forces. So the evilish and the bad forces who wanted me, whether it's because of stupidity or because of hatred, they couldn't get to me. And God just made things happen in a good way. I'm sure of that because I felt it later in my life. This is just a mystical experience. I cannot prove it with numbers, but I just had these experiences that sometimes I was just protected. I was helped out. When I called out in a dire straight situations, the answer came within a week or a month or two. And I could have, once I went on for 1.5 years without any work or any good responses, and the money was running out and the situation looked no good. And I said to myself, I will call out on this one God that I've always believed in is there, but I don't know his shape or color or face or how he is. I'm not sure he's representing the Muslims or the Christians or the Jewish anymore. I don't know if he likes any of them, really, truly. But I called him, said, you, whoever it is, the God of everything, I'm here and I need you. And trust me, the answer came within a month. I got a best position in my life as a teacher at the seminary, teaching students in pedagogy, and I was like a lecturer, and that position I was not really looking forward to it, but I loved it and I'm qualified for it. And so I could see time by time when I can tell many of these stories. It's personal, it's not easy to explain, and people can refer them to, oh yeah, but you applied and then they accepted you, so what has God to do with it? But I can tell you I wouldn't even have opened my eyes to that position or took myself together to apply for it if it wasn't for an inspiration I got, and they wouldn't have accepted me. I could have been rejected like any other places. So something just happens sometime when I call out. It's like I get heard, and I'm happy about that. And that's where I am today. I'm in this spiritual way of looking at God and life, and I want to be the child when I die. I want to be the one with the childish heart who don't hate anyone, but really hates people's injustices and hate the cheat that they are doing. I really sometimes have had these ideas that and liked it, that I hope sometimes all these people who let me down and who let themselves down and who misuse their power, that they could be punished in one way or another. And I hope life will punish them and the afterlife will punish them, because they are not entitled, and they don't have the green light to do that. When people get power or the ability to cheat to win, and they do it, well, I know Machiavelli and I know the realism of politics today, and that's the deep shit we're brought into, that we have to accept that, yeah, if you cheat and you win, that's because you're clever and you keep winning. But that's not true. Sociologist has to dig into these issues. They're not digging enough. I've read many biographies. The guy who created not the Kellogg's brand as well, but the other brand called Quakes. He cheated and he took the recipe. This guy cheated and took the recipe of the one of the two colleagues, Kellogg's brothers, And he built up an empire, but then he got hit. He got hit hard by sickness and illness and many years of struggling. And you could say it's all coincidence as well. You can believe what you like, but I believe it's a way and short way of God showing that life has some rules to it and has some ways to it. And maybe I was punished too because I wasn't clear in my intention, or I was doing wrong to the country that did me good, and I should never have participated in that. And okay, I accept my punishment, I accept my isolation, and I turned away also from the goodness of God for some time, and maybe that also put me in a deep abyss. So I believe there are some logical but hidden ways that life runs into that it's hard to explain for ordinary people who can only see the materials around them. But everyone who had a spiritual experience or lived long enough can see that sometimes things happen in a miraculous way or in ways you don't really expect. But the daughter of this guy, of the Quaker, she got the empire and she helped a guy building the first freezers of the world, and we got this amazing invention. And sometimes people are being deprived of good things, like the guy who created Coca-Cola, Pemberton there. He wanted to create a remedy for his trouble after the war. He was sick and ill and was hit by sickness, and he wanted something to calm down the sickness, like a kind of pharmaceutical remedy, and he created Coca-Cola by mistake or by side effect, and he died without gaining on it. It's not easy to do a lot and then die without seeing the good results, and that has happened to many across the world. So a kind of paradise and hell, a kind of punishment and reward, is very, very much logical when we look deep into the world and how it works. And all these ideas everyone is selling us, that if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, you will become a millionaire. Let me tell you how I become a millionaire. Oh my God, these people are selling you books. They're just selling you ideas. And whoever read these books and became a millionaire without one of a million, like the lottery ticket, and that's because it's not all about what you do, but it's also sometimes about what you get. It's a kind of present. And now I'm becoming more religious and not talking about the cartoon crisis. But what I want to say about this is that I've found my way between the tribalism and the racism in this case after many years of digging, and I'm clear and happy about that. But how can we build bridges, and how can we help people out of that? Because what Jung said was very true. In the beginning, very first beginning of his small text about the conscience and the unconscious. He said that the biggest struggle and the only way to solve wars and crises in the world is by solving the problem of the human psyche. We have to look deeply into that and understand how we pull ourselves one by one or in groups out of these abysses. And I know it seems impossible, especially if we look at the world today, and people listening to who would ever go and listen to this, maybe one or two, 30 millions will go and look at how a fat singer like made herself slim, or someone talking about their nails, or a guy selling them lottery tickets, but only maybe 5 to 10 will listen to this, and maybe 5 out of the 10 will think it's hilarious mysticism that doesn't have anything to do with the reality. Well, okay, I've chosen to walk on this path, and I've looked into history that I would 100% more be this guy on my own, living in this life like this, than being part of a tribe who just want to fight the other tribe and live in that way. I couldn't stay in it. I just couldn't. I had to look deeper into myself. And as I said in the beginning, I was part of two societies. How can I balance between them? And how can I be part of both? That's very difficult. It's happening also many places in the world. People who are part of India and Pakistan, part of Russia and Ukraine, part of USA and Canada, USA and Mexico, and so on and so on and so on in Africa. Today, the notion that we are part of more than one culture is actually a growing phenomenon, growing reality, because more and more people are part of something more than this small closed community or entity that they have been in the history, like their parents and grandparents. If you were a fisherman, you would be it for the whole life, and you would be staying close to the coast all the time and living in this village, and you know nothing about a lot of other stuff, and you just relate to those people around you and part of their community and religion and thoughts and beliefs. Sometimes we heard the stories of one who broke out of that and took away another than the fisherman's way, or the hunter's way, or the worker's way, and trying to find himself outside all of this. And this is maybe what I have been trying to do, find myself in between my origin ways and the new ways, my Muslim culture and Christian culture, my Arabic and Danish identities and sides. That's not easy, and not many people has the resources to do that. It needs a lot of both time, energy, brain power, a lot of insight and reading, and most importantly, you need a friend or two to help you on the path, because you're digging into things that will make you strange, and that could make you go wrong in many ways in what you're doing. So the Khartoum crisis brought me to these realizations because I was isolated, and because I was betrayed and left alone by the people I stood with, and because the other part that I loved and liked and was part of as well, the Danish part, hated me so much. So I was really thrilled and sad and frustrated by how easy for people just to hate you and love you for just because of where you're standing, and not because who you are and what you're thinking or the way you're saying things, and how easy it is just to judge you without looking into details, and how easy it is to distort your picture by people with power. And that's the biggest saddening thing for me when I look into it, when it comes to Western society. That's happening a lot, that the media is misusing their power. They have been doing so for many decades. Not all the media, but some of them. They know they can distort your picture, your words, the way you're saying things. And now we have deep fake and all the other chilly stuff that they can use, even more distorting and manipulating. But it will all go back to hit us all. They can't live in that. And I know many who had breakdowns, psychological breakdowns in these communities. And they know they're doing something that's not true. They can see your picture and they distort it. It's like the people working in the intelligence community, like the spying communities and intelligence. They know things about people, and they are able to distort it. And the people who do that, it's not easy. You have to be half a psychopath. Even the psychopaths doesn't always live up to the duty, because there is something deeply human about realizing that you are doing wrong to somebody else. You have really to dehumanize that person or that group or those on the other side. And you can only do that if you have a kind of tribalism and a kind of ideology that you're stuck to, that you can see the other in a dehumanized form, like he's the devil or the son of the devil, or the people helping the devil. That's how Christians and Muslims fought in the Middle East. They couldn't have fought if they saw Richard Lanhart and what was he called, Salahuddin, playing chess or having a meal, or Salahuddin sending his doctor to help Richard Lanhart, or Lanhart sending gifts to Salahuddin. Well, how would these Christian missionaries priests have convinced people to fight for the Holy Land, who is in the hand of the infidels, who are distorting it and dirtying it? But when they went there, they could see it was pretty beautiful and well kept. And the same happens to the Muslims. They want to fight the West and put it down. And when they go there, they see, wow. I remember one Muslim scholar who also have these ideas. And when he came here a visit to Denmark, said, wow, everything here is so neat, neatly arranged. I remember I brought him here, I think in 2010 or 11. And at one time I brought a guy here from the community of the Middle East, PhD in pedagogy and Islamic doctrines. We wanted like to open a school. I guess it was 2010 or 11. And when he came here, he said, "Oh, how neat this society is! Even the bushes are cut so equally nice and neatly." And I thought, do these people even realize that these countries are well functioning and people here really care for things around them? They have this picture that they must be evil and bad, as the picture from the first side, that everyone outside of our society and realm and culture, they are not necessarily good. We are occupied with these enemy pictures, and you have to dehumanize the other, as I was saying, that if you don't dehumanize, you can't kill him, and you can't hurt him, and you can't distort his picture. If these people in the newspaper would look at me very fairly, they wouldn't distort my picture, but they would say, "Oh, he's cheating us. We can't trust him. He's a liar. He speaks with two tongues. Maybe he wants something. He's out to do something bad to us." And that's the way they arrange for their psyche to accept hurting me, because they think of me as an enemy. And the same with the other part. He betrayed us. He wasn't a true believer at all from the beginning. We always knew there was something not true about him. Maybe he was a spy all along. The Danes had maybe brought him up in the Muslim community to hurt us from within. Stupid all the way of these thoughts, conspiracy theory and theory about everyone is just against them and everyone is an enemy. Okay, there are enemies and you are enemies to each other, but if you keep looking outside and forget looking inside, you won't find the source for this dehumanization and the look at on the enemy. And that's why some of the people in the intelligence community, they get breakdowns and they leave and they maybe don't want to be part of these things anymore. And that's exactly the idea of Robert Ludlum's books and later movies, with the beautiful movies with Matt Damon about the guy who loses his memory and doesn't know who he is, and he's a human, he's kind, he's nice, but he's a killing machine. And how did he become a killing machine? The Jason Bourne movies. He became a killing machine because somebody manipulated him deeply to serve an idea, an ideology, a tribalism or a racism, an ideology that they carry, that you're doing it for the goods of everyone else, of these people in this paradise you are in. So when I look at the West from the Middle East, I see holes in the paradise, and when I look at the Middle East from the West, I also see at the moment even bigger holes in that paradise. And when I look at the world from the religious binacles and glasses, I can see that it's lacking a lot of moral spirituality and the good stuff that there is to find in the religious curves and views and ways of life. And when I look at the religion from the scientifically, more logically and analytical way, in the secularism as it's called today, I see a lot of troublesome superstition sometimes, and hatred and stigmatizing others, and way of hiding the bad sides of the ego under the neat face of being a pious person. And when I look at the religious people, how their hatred are expressed, that's in all communities. You have the very right wing and between Jewish and Israelis. You have it in the Muslims. You have it in the Christians, the Hindus. Oh my God, I can tell you, despite that I follow the guy Sadhguru, I like him very much, and I love the way he meditate and show people the way of getting into harmony and peace with themselves. And I believe that he really honestly want world peace, and he want people to get out of these illusions they are living in their own cultures. I believe deeply that he's a good force. But if you look behind it and you look into the not only the Hindu community, but the Sikh community and the other communities around them, my God, they can be filled with such they can be filled with such a tribalist and racist approach to the others. They are filled with hatred. Some of them towards, for instance, Muslims or Christians and minorities. I've seen Christians that's carrying the message of love of God, and I've seen others. I can tell you, their doubt shines out of their eyes. They don't believe you. They don't believe that you are coming to meet them because you're really interested in knowing more about how they practice the way they worship God and they see life. They think you're up to something. And one of them told me that once. I was very shocked. A priest from a church I once went to get in touch with very broad community about NFS Grundtvig, the Danish, the father of the modern Danish religious community. And I told him I like his way of thinking and the way he developed in his life and changed from this hardcore, narrow-minded a priest's son to being more universal in his thoughts. And later on, he told me, "I think you're up to something, and you wanna destroy the church from within." And I was God. I told him, "Listen, I'm a fugitive. I'm a guy who doesn't have a place to be, neither between Muslims or the Danes, neither between Christians or the Arabs. I'm lost. I'm a wanderer on my own in this life. I'm walking my own line and I'm exploring, and I really want to just feel and understand how others are." So some of these people, I don't understand what they read and what they think, but something is totally wrong. And I found them among the Muslims. I can tell you, once you are stuck in some of these Islamic communities, there's no way out, because as they say for joke, when you go in, your little head will be cut off. That means that the thing between your legs have to be circumcised, and if you want to get out again, your big head will be cut off. You will be circumcised from above. And they don't look into what if I have a good idea, and if I have a strong belief, and if I know God is the light, why should I be afraid of people coming or going and leaving or don't leaving? Leave people to come and go as they like. They will find God in God's time. And if they don't find God, well, that's their loss. And they have to change some of the way they really just judge people too early and too quickly, and giving people time not only to grow but to understand. So this darkness that's hidden in some of these ideas are some of what I wanted to get away from and to look into in my life and during my lifetime. And that's why I started this process of looking into the cartoons. And looking back, it was a fair fight. It was okay. Because in the beginning, it wasn't like about unleashing hell. It was about being heard, and that's true. At the same time, it was a misunderstanding of the freedom of speech, which we all should agree to and what can you say? Support, because without it, none of us will be able to say their mind. So it's a basic for people with values and religions. The problem with the people who made the freedom of expression was that they did it in a manner that was very stigmatizing and negative to one religious group, and that was a wrong way of using it or protecting it in many ways. So the lesson is here that the religious groups, like the ones I was in, should be the first supporters of freedom of speech, because otherwise they would have been in jail and they would have been pushed out of the country. And on the other side, the people supporting the freedom of speech, they should be much more wisely in how to use it and not using it to step on other people's feelings and religious beliefs just because they can use the freedom of speech and they have the power that protects them in using it. No, it should be a tool for expression. It should be protected for everyone. And well, who protected the feeling of the minority at that time? None. They were actually, in a way, stepped on. And so these are like I have to maybe to start here. Now it became the end of my story, but maybe I will continue by starting with this idea. reflections I had after the Khartoum crisis, the years that followed, was of basically two parts. One part was more political and societal, and the other part was personal and psychological. And let me start with the political and society related reflections I had. The first one was that the freedom of speech was actually so important that I realized that even the religious people should have supported it, because without it they would have been in jail or thrown out of the country. Like if we in Denmark had been in another country where we opposed the mainstream media and political power, we would have suffered much more dire consequences. I'm not saying that we didn't suffer consequences even in Denmark, and we were isolated and in a way pushed out of society. So the Danish society and the Danish power establishment shouldn't look at themselves as angels, because they're just using another means to put people out of out of society, like happened to me. I was pushed totally out of society in a way that didn't kill me, but really put me on a psychological challenge that I'm going to talk about later. And at the same time, the freedom of speech is a tool, and that should be protective to all, and not a way to use the power like to step on someone. It's important to protect everyone's freedom of speech, because then we can be in a society together. But if you disagree with someone and you can use that freedom of speech to spit on this group, or to stigmatize them, or give a negative account or picture of them, especially on their symbols, then you are in a way misusing the freedom of speech in a way that shouldn't be used. So the ways that went wrong for the Muslim and Islamic community is that they wanted to oppose something that they are actually using every day, and I'm using it every day, and I'm raised and I'm here in Denmark, and I'm a teacher of society, and I know what it means historically and actually in our real life. At the same time, I could also see that this was also used as a way, like a universal idea, a kind of an ideal thought that was used in practice to keep the power, or to push someone out of the society, or to make people ignore them and not listen to them, because you are scared of them getting more power or influence, or thinking that they are bringing some dark thoughts. I'm not saying that the Islamists are not bringing ideas that could be dangerous to the society, or dark thoughts, but what I'm saying is that the people who are opposing it are using the tool of freedom of speech to their gain. They're not using it to protect everyone, to help everyone, and to make it a tool that everyone can use. And that's what went totally wrong in that Khartoum crisis. There were no listening. There were accusations. There were predefined ideas about the other part. And the stronger part, as I said many times before, had and has always the bigger responsibility. With great powers comes great responsibilities, as the Israelis have of motto. That's from the Old Testament as well. And that's what went wrong for the established community in Denmark and the politicians, that they had the power and they could talk to the newspapers. We didn't even get through with a letter, and didn't get any response. And we have the intelligence community always looking into what we are doing and can find out how things are going. But these people, they can talk to the intelligence community as part of who they are, and maybe some of them are their friends, or meeting them from time to other. I don't know, but they have a bigger power, and with that power comes the responsibility of not stepping on a minority. So that line was clear for me that there was something that went wrong. But what went most wrong is that the minority, and a part of that minority, was being hostage in a game of power that some of the Islamist leaders were leading, in my opinion, as it showed me later, for own gains and for positioning themselves, or getting more powerful voices in Society has also debated the Khartoum crisis with a depth of different levels, and some have reached the ideas that this should not have happened at all, and others said that it was necessary and it was unavoidable because there was a build-up to get there and to finally get the clash. Some parties wanted the clash, and unfortunately I was part of one of these two parties, and later on I realized that that this is not what should have been. But at the same time, we knew it was like a kind of a clash between values and ideologies. And when you look back at it, sometimes you can see that it's still ongoing, but in minor ways. And sometimes you can see it's blowing up in other ways in different parts of the world. The same clash between the same ideologies, the liberalism and the Islamism, and the new communism, new communist face that's getting in and proving itself as an ally with some of the anti-liberal sides, and the new you call it new racist side in the other part that's also infiltrating the idea of secularism and liberal ideologies. And so the Khartoum crisis was a very symbolic case that should be studied and should be looked in depth into, because it wasn't just a small case in Denmark. It became a worldwide case, and it started in Denmark, and small things can become very huge events if they develop in a wrong way and they are not contained in a good manner. And that's what happened to this crisis. It was a type of lack of containment in all in due time, so it doesn't become such a huge story. But if it hasn't become a huge story, something else would have, because depicting the symbol of a religion in such a negative way, it's not gonna be an easy task to get through with without some kind of response at one point or another, or some kind of anti-opposition. And that's what happened later, despite that the Danish part won, and they won with the help of the United States and the diplomacy in the Arab world, and making the Arabic world calm again, and the leaders accepting. At the same time, they lost because they had to take much more consideration in the years to come than they knew of before the crisis. And these considerations are not told to people, but they are doing it de facto. And the Arab world is much more aware of what they want from the West after that. And they were pushing for not only regulations against such speeches, but in practical that newspapers and people who wanna speak has to be like contacted by the government and being explained that what they are doing is not in the interest of the national security and peace of the country, because they are stirring up cases that's not for them to be putting the fire on, and these sides of the crisis are hidden and unseen, but they are there. I also learned from this crisis that it can be a way of a secret bridge for understanding between people you didn't think could get to an understanding. It can make wake-ups in the mind of people also about the other part and the other side. It can make people dig deeper into who is this Muhammad everyone is talking about, or what is this newspaper all about, what's their ideology, what's their history, and what are they defending with their lives, and they're ready to maybe get under protection 24 hours to gain. So it's sometimes beyond the crisis itself, an opportunity to reach out. And unfortunately, again, the ones with the greater powers has this responsibility. The newspaper, the government in Denmark, and the countries in the Gulf who took over the case as an international community, they have the obligation to be reaching out also on